opening scene of this episode just got me thinking, man, Jaime has some serious plot armor because not only do they emerge from the water pretty far from what I'm assuming was the point where Drogon shot fire at them, but the fact that Jaime survived not drowning with his armor and a metal hand and his sword, holy crap, that is some serious level of plot armor that I'm not used to seeing in Game of Thrones. Then again, we are getting closer to the finale, to the ending of the story. So this happening is I think I'm going to be a little bit more common now. Also, I will bend the knee if you excuse my nasally voice for this review. I'm fighting off a cold, so just letting you guys know. We start off with Tyrion walking through the pile of ashes that Daenerys left. I know some people last time were complaining about the fact that Dany seemed to be using Drogon to burn supplies. She was burning carriages and stuff. So he's walking through them, and you can hear a very, very solemn, very somber version of the Reigns of Castamere, which I thought fit that scene perfectly. I guess people were questioning whether Daenerys could just take the food and supplies for herself, even though her goal is to suffocate Cersei and cut off any access to resources from King's Landing. And she starts off her speech to the soldiers by saying, "I'm not here to burn your cities or your families." I have to admit that line probably would have been a little bit more convincing had she not just got finished burning the entire trail to the ground. She also burns Dickon Tarly and Randall Tarly alive. And there's a line by Tyrion where he's trying to convince them to bend the knee. He tells them, "You boy are the future of your house." But he's wrong. Sam Tarly, who's just leaving Old Town, is the future of his house now. But I do think that that's going to create some tension, probably for season 8 between Jon and Sam and Daenerys. Once Sam finds out that Daenerys burned his family alive, it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to react to that. Then again, it's not like Sam really liked his dad, nor his dad him. And also Sam seems to be very passive in nature. But we'll see. That burning scene kind of creates a concern in the minds of Varys and Tyrion, regarding a fear that they have that Daenerys may be gradually becoming her father, the Mad King. I think it's obvious that she's not there yet. I don't think she's ever going to get to that point just because, like Varys said in this episode, if she has a good advisor like Tyrion, you can pretty much prevent that from happening. However, I do think, just for the sake of storytelling, every character has to have an arc, and so I definitely think that she'll eventually hit a crossroads where she's going to have to decide what's more important to her. The power, just seeking power over Westeros, or respecting the Targaryen rightful lineage, which, as we know, that belongs to Jon. The Iron Throne rightfully belongs to Jon. He's the rightful heir, the rightful Targaryen heir to the throne. She's going to have to decide whether to bend the knee and recognize Jon as the rightful king, or fight Jon for the Iron Throne. That being said, they're already beginning to set up the reveal of Jon's lineage with Sam. There's a scene with Gilly in the library, even though it was kind of dismissed by Sam. He was angry about the fact that he wasn't getting anywhere, talking about how many steps does the Citadel have. But there's a bit of dialogue from Gilly that is absolutely crucial for Jon. Okay, she basically says that there was a maester that annulled a marriage between Rhaegar and Elia Martell. So those two got a divorce, and then Rhaegar went to marry Lyanna Stark, which legitimizes Jon even more because it means that Jon was not born out of wedlock. He wasn't just the product of an affair. There was a marriage before he actually was born between Rhaegar and Lyanna. And I gotta give a shout out to Emilia Clarke's facial expressions throughout this episode. I think she's become a much better actress than she started off as, and I have to sort of commend that. So when she sees Jon pet Drogon, which in and of itself is a very iconic scene, he literally just turns into a puppy in front of Jon. Granted, you can tell Jon is a little bit frightened. You see his hand shaking there for a moment, but eventually gets to pet him. Also, when Jorah comes back, again, her facial expressions are on point. When she decides to let them go to Eastwatch, You can feel the tension there. She's definitely like thinking about, I really want to see Jon again. Like there was this moment where she even said like, I've gotten used to him. And just look at that. Very, very good facial expressions from Daenerys Targaryen. She has the best facial expression, folks. But my favorite facial expression from Daenerys in this episode is without a doubt when she tells Jon, look at my dragons. They're beautiful, no? And Jon says, wasn't exactly the word I was looking for. And she turns around to look at him. What did you just say? That is a total deal breaker for our upcoming aunt and nephew incestuous relationship. Not cool. Also, tensions are rising between the Stark sisters back in Winterfell.
Because Littlefinger, I'm assuming Littlefinger wants Arya to kill Sansa or something. This is a copy of the letter that she found, and this is essentially a letter that Sansa wrote back in season 1, back when Ned was imprisoned, and she was basically kind of blackmailed by Cersei to write that letter to Robb to tell him, you got to bend the knee, you got to keep the king's peace. Joffrey at that point was the king, just to stop trouble. So she was kind of forced into doing it, and Arya's probably not aware of that. So if she's already expecting that Sansa has treasonous intentions when it comes to taking the North from Jon, then, I mean, this letter is definitely no good. It's just adding more fuel to the fire. Now, do I think something bad is going to happen between the two of them, like Arya is going to end up killing her sister? No, absolutely not, and there's two reasons for it. First of all, we have Bran. He could basically see everything. So if worst comes to worst, Bran could pretty much just tell Sansa and Arya the truth. So he can just completely ruin Littlefinger's plan that way. Also, there's a pretty interesting quote that was said in the trailer, which has followed, I think, the Stark family for a very long time, which is, when the cold winds blow, the lone wolf dies, and the pack survives. And that's essentially, I think, the lesson that the Stark kids are going to have to learn this season, which is that in order for them to survive, they have to stick together. They either stick together or they die alone. So and I think that'll be the resolution. And even in this episode, Sansa was like telling Arya, we have to learn to work together if we are to survive. And speaking of Arya, Gendry's back. It's just all of a sudden, he was doing his blacksmith stuff, and Davos, I think, has a quote directly aimed at the fans when he says, I thought you might still be rowing. That became kind of a meme in regards to Gendry's character. Where is Gendry? He's probably still rowing. I can't wait to see Gendry and Arya fight together, because Arya's really stealthy, and Gendry has a hammer. He used it to take down those guys that were consuming the fermented crab Viagra. You learn something new every day, I guess.
I also really appreciated the conversation that he has with Jon, just because, it's kind of like the new generation coming to terms with the fact that the old generation is gone. Ned and Robert were pretty cool with each other back in the day, and now these two bastards are forming their own bond so that they can fight together in the wars to come against the Long Night. And it's literally not only just them. Like this episode, that's one of the things. This episode had so many reunions. I mean, if this were a normal season, I'm pretty sure that each one of these reunions would be saved for an episode each. So we have Jorah reuniting with Daenerys. Okay, then we have Tyrion reuniting with Jaime, having a conversation. By the way, great bit of acting from Peter Dinklage in that scene. There's a very brief moment where his voice cracks when he talks about being a dwarf. He says, do you think I chose to be born this way? Oh, it was very, very emotional. One of the best quotes in the episode, not including Tormund's by the end, about who are we trying to convince? That was classic comedy gold. But I also thought it was hilarious when they arrive at King's Landing and Tyrion's like, last time I was here, I killed my father with a crossbow. To which Davos replies, last time I was here, you killed my son with some wildfire. So good for him. But also, I do kind of feel for the guy, because throughout this episode, it's kind of like, he's giving people advice and tips, and not a whole lot of people listen to him. This episode, we also find out that Cersei is preggers again by Jaime, which is kind of weird if you consider Maggie the Frog's prophecy. I'm going to reread it to you just in case you forgot, but back when Cersei was a young girl, very young girl, she met this fortune teller that essentially told her the future events of her life. And so she starts off by saying, you will never wed the prince, but you will wed the king. So you will be married to a king. Which, as we know, turned out to be Robert Baratheon. And Cersei then asks, so I will be the queen? And Maggie says, yes, queen you shall be, until there comes another, younger and more beautiful, to cast you down and take all that you hold dear. So at this point, it definitely seems like the prophecy is referring to Daenerys taking the throne away from Cersei.
Then Cersei asks, will I have children? And Maggie says, 6 and 10 for him. So the king will have 6 and 10, and 3 for you. Notice how she's only saying 3. And then she goes on to say how literally you will outlive your kids. Like all of your kids will die before you. But she only says 3, not 4. So I'm guessing that that kid that she's pregnant with right now probably not going to get to be born, because the prophecy only mentions that she'll have 3 children. Then Maggie goes on to say, and when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you. So that's how she'll die. Now the thing here is that we don't really know what the Valonqar is or who that's referring to, but it's a word that literally means little brother in High Valyrian. So a lot of people have speculated that that could be Tyrion. Or it could also be referring to Jaime, because even though Jaime and Cersei are twins, Cersei was technically born a couple of seconds before Jaime was.
And then we have that scene in Eastwatch, which, by the way, they added Eastwatch to the map. And now Jon Snow, Jorah Mormont, Tormund, Gendry, Thoros of Myr, Beric Dondarrion, and the Hound are all in one place in a matter of minutes. So it's a very conflicting thing, because the pacing of the show is going by so fast, especially when compared to the previous seasons. Yet at the same time, you're definitely looking forward to what's going to happen next week, because you know next week things are going to be lit. Another battle against the White Walkers north of the Wall. Last time we got one of those was Hardhome, and that episode is one of the best of the series.
It's about to go down next week, Game of Thrones style. Winter is here. The Night King is about to make his move. Do you think he knew that Eastwatch would be his best port of entry into the Seven Kingdoms, and that's why he decided to move his army or begin marching his army to Eastwatch? Maybe he got a vision of the wall collapsing in that area, and that's why he decided to start moving east. Anyway, I thought this was a pretty great setup episode for Game of Thrones. Like the video if you did. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because I do Game of Thrones reviews every Sunday night after the episode airs. Comment down below with your thoughts about any specific scene or about the episode as a whole, and I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye.